Did you put on makeup and everything?
Just a little family, just a little family history. My name is Janice K. Masterman, married Schultz. I was born April 2nd, 1939 in Walkerton, Indiana. I think my parents were probably renting a part of a house um, that I was familiar with, obviously having grown up in Walkerton. And Dr. Linton and his wife was the nurse who I remember growing up. We're still the doctor in town, and his wife was a nurse. In fact, much later on in life, after I was married and had children, we named our oldest daughter after Dr. Linton's nurse, Laura. Um, I know at some point in time things that you obviously should have asked your mom and dad, but never really talked about. I know we left Walkerton after I was born and moved to a boxcar, my mom tells me, a railroad boxcar, where my dad went to work in Gary. Um, I had a brother, Richard, who was born March 16th, 1940. So there was only like 11 months difference. He's the 16th of March and I'm the 2nd of April. So there was that, what, 19 days or something difference in us age wise, almost
Must
a
have been
year.
a cold winter.
Must have been a cold, it must have been a very cold winter by all means. I'm not sure if Richard was born while we still were in Walkerton or if he was actually born when we were in the boxcar. And I can't even tell you how long we lived in the boxcar because obviously I was a baby and don't remember. We moved back to Walkerton, I do know, and I have my brother has lots of pictures of the two of us out on a farm outside of Walkerton. My parents rented, I think, probably a farm and across from some friends that they knew really well. We have lots of pictures of Richard and I outside playing with our dogs and the calves and stuff. Uh, from there, from there, we moved. Now, at some point in time, and how long we lived there, I'm not even sure. At some point in time, Rex had to have been born, obviously.
And I was born December 6th, 1943, so there's a gap period in there, which there's no pictures, no stories. So,
Yeah, so we really.
So we don't really know in that gap period of where we lived. However, we did move to Harrison Street.
No, back up because
back up a little.
Yeah, back up because we left when we left the farm in Walkerton. We moved to New Carlisle.
Oh, that's right. No,
Yeah.
whether did I go or not, or was I there or not? There's a gap period.
There's a gap there. If he was, he could have been a baby. He probably was a baby, I would assume, because I think when we came back to Walkerton and
I'm a pictureless baby.
you're
No pictures of the baby Rex. So he may have been dropped off at a doorstep and said, "Here, have a child."
But there's no pictures of us when we were babies.
Baby babies.
Baby babies. The pictures that mom and that had saved basically were when we got older, and as we laughed and said, they never took pictures inside. They were always taken outside. Of us outside in the yard with the dogs or whatever. But I know we lived in New Carlisle because actually started school up there. That we were on a farm. My dad was working for Bendix at the time, nights or baby days, because I remember my mom plowing, doing the tractor, and us kids playing Richard and I playing in the field. I have no idea where Rex was at.
He was non-existent.
You had to be because there's only 4 years difference in our age.
She left me in the house all by myself.
So I would have started school when I was probably 6. And you would have been 2.
Yeah.
So you had to have been around. I must have been taking care of you and don't even remember.
You don't remember.
I honestly, and how long we lived, we only obviously lived in New Carlisle, I think a short period of time, possibly a year. I think my dad realized that farming was not what he was meant to be. And that could have been maybe when he actually stopped working at Bendix and went to work for Studebakers. And maybe went to Studebakers. And then we moved back to Walkerton on Harrison Street. And then I started 2nd grade. Actually, I was in a 1-room schoolhouse in New Carlisle. We had all
grades?
All grades in it. That's about all I remember about it was everybody was in one room, and I guess you must have each had your own little separate time that you learned something. Uh, but then we came back to Walkerton, and I know I remember starting second grade. So, and Richard probably would have been in first grade, I would assume, since there's such a short I mean,
First grade.
yeah,
Okay.
he probably started he could have, or maybe kindergarten. I'm not sure, depending on how you're.
Well, you graduated in 57.
And he
He
graduated.
graduated 58.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that would make sense then.
right.
Okay. And I graduated in 61.
In 61, yeah,
Okay.
4 years after,
4
yeah.
years, okay.
So I mean,
So that gels anyway.
that
So,
that part gels.
okay. So when I was born, December 6, 1943, then what I remember is the Walkerton home at 711 Harrison Street, right across from a lumber yard. And the only pictures I think of that time period I can remember all three of us, I was probably 5 and, probably 7 and 9 type of thing. Those pictures are grown. That's the earliest pictures.
Second grade, you probably would have been 7.
Okay. So in that time frame, basically.
Yeah, you would have been 3. You probably moved there maybe when you were 3. From there on, that type, I would imagine. And that was also just an apartment. I mean, it was a house, but had apartments in it because we just had the lower back part of the house. We had a nice big backyard to play in. I remember. I do remember that.
Yep. We had a garage out back that we never used, and I climbed up on top of the garage, fell off the top of the garage into a pile of glass, and cut my wrist. And I still got a wishbone. I don't know if you can see it right there, but Tom Eisner took me and Mom up to Dr. Linton, and that was at his brand new Studebaker. And I remember bleeding all over it. And Dr. Linton, Laura, the nurse, they stitched me up and didn't put anything in it because it was bleeding so bad. And they stitched me up, and there's a scar. Remember, it's a wishbone. So that's my little bit of luck, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
Well, the main thing I think all of us kids remember was, living across from the lumberyard. We loved it when it rained, and we were allowed to go outside and run through the mud puddles outside. But one day, we went over to the lumberyard because there was an entrance off of our street back there, and
we could slip through the gate.
Oh, is that what we did?
And we could slip through the gate right there, and go back there when they weren't open.
And we were running through puddles. To this day, I have no idea what that was. Maybe you do. All I know is we lost tracks.
Yeah, they were on the railroad track, and they're actually coal chutes that went underneath the track. So when the train came up and dumped the coal underneath the train into these conveyors, it took it up into the back, some piles, okay? Well, we were running through it, and I fell in one of these empty mud puddles that was full of water, and Dickie, my brother, pulled me out by my hair and saved my life.
Right. I mean,
I owe you one, Dickie. So
you had to be little. I was very little at that time, probably.
But I can remember that, so it's like remember the story, maybe
right.
Not. But anyway,
we had probably one of the first TVs, black and white.
The only thing was on it was what? Fights? Wrestling and fights.
We knew wrestling, all the stars of...
TV was about that big?
Yep, right. Very tiny.
Dad worked at Studebaker's.
Right.
1952, we moved to the...
Is that when we moved to Tyler?
That's when we moved to 1103 Tyler Street, where Mom and Dad lived the rest of their life, basically. The house had been deserted probably for 10, 15 years. There was, they call them horseweed weeds that were 6 to 7 feet tall over the whole front yard. They didn't have an inside bathroom, had an outside toilet. It was a double-seater, by the way. Had an old barn on the property, and for the next 20-some years, Grandpa redid the entire house, put hardwood floors in it. Grandpa Feckler had the kitchen redone. An Amish group came down and redid our entire kitchen for us. Our memories of our grandparents, though, it was Chester and Dora Feckler. They lived on an 80-acre farm in Bremen, Indiana, and that's all they knew. Their farm was their supporting, raise their cows, their chickens, and their pigs, and their meat, and everything. And we had probably the best times.
We spent practically
Every
almost every weekend,
yeah, every weekend
going
to
because Dad worked hard all week, and Dad wanted to go fishing in the summertime, and he wanted to go hunting in the wintertime, and he didn't go
he didn't
with
go down
us.
with us much except
He
for Christmas,
the only time he
holidays.
went out was when they were when there was work to be done on the farm, like butchering, or they were
Check the camera, make sure
combining,
we're still running.
you know, at the time hay. He went out then. Um, there was a number of times Dad went, but basically we went just as a just the three kids and Mom went every weekend out and spent. And I remember coming home on Sunday evenings, always listening to the radio. Um, man, my mind is, I can't remember what, Fibber McGee and Molly, and I can't remember, there was some real drama one that Fred could probably remember the names of some of these. But, you know, we would spend our summers out there with them. You know, they had a huge garden, and our grandparents furnished, you know, really probably all the meat that we ever needed
That we ever had, yeah.
came from the farm. And canning, you know, my mom went out there and they canned.
We had popcorn every night we went out there.
Yeah, and every night they had a grape harbor, and every night they would pour us a little tiny
It was
glass,
like a shot.
a shot of glass.
That's all you got.
That's all you got, and you know, you never ask for seconds. I mean, this
Never disrespected them. Never
no.
raised your voice. If they even looked at you, they never had to.
They never had to. I remember them as being the most loving, kind people at the table. You know, and I guess
said prayers.
Always said prayers, and you know, I always thought they were so religious. But talking to Mom, you know, I don't know that they didn't go to church when Mom was growing up necessarily.
We always went when we were down there, though. With them.
We always went when we were down there,
church.
but I think that was something that maybe they found their faith as they got older, like a great deal of people do, you know. Because I thought they were that all my life, you know. I remember one of the neat things that we used to love to do as kids. They had an attic. They had an upstairs, and they had one room that was kind of an attic storage thing, and they had this huge medical book, that showed all kinds of. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember that?
It was a cool attic.
Yeah, and we always enjoyed going. I don't know why we were fascinated by going through, looking at pictures in this huge medical. I'm sure this is probably how they diagnosed things that were wrong with them. You know, was looking through to find information and stuff.
They had a smokehouse that you could go in there, and they would have probably 15, 20 hams hanging in the smokehouse. They also did something that was real interesting. It was a dried sweet corn, and on big tins, and they dry it, and it was just almost like eating candy. You could sneak in there and grab you a handful of it and eat it, and it was the best. And
that you'd ever want.
We one time, Grandpa Feckler said we had 7 acres in Walkerton on our farm, our mini farm. We had horses and some cows and chickens, and he said, "You want me to come over and pick out a pig that was going to have babies?" And he said, "You got your choice, and I'll bring it down." So I went over to the pen, and he had like 10 or 11 pigs that were going to have little ones, and I picked the fattest one out. Okay, the fattest one. We got it home. About a month or so later, she had twins, and all his had 8, 9 piglets. So he taught me a lesson: don't be greedy. No, not necessarily the biggest. Not necessarily the biggest is the best.
That's
you know.
True.
So he always laughed about that, but that was something he gave me. I was very involved in 4-H, probably because of the result of them. But I had rabbits, and I had raised. I had gardening that I had, and Richard had dairy cattle. I had sheep, and one time, just before the LaPorte County Fair, we were getting the sheep ready, and Dad said, "Well, we need to wash them and get them all prettied up, and then you flatten the backs of them all so the 3 of them would be all squared off, and so the took them to the county fair, and the judges are looking them over real good, and they're sticking their fingers in them, and they're sticking their fingers in. They had a funny look on their face, and I ended up getting a reserve grand champion, and the reason was that they had no lanolin in the wool, and if we would have put we washed it out, so if we'd have put baby oil in there, we probably would have got maybe a grand champion. But that was the reason why we didn't get it, because there was no lanolin oil in the wool, and so that was kind of a funny deal.
That you could have gotten, yeah. And I was in 4-H, but my 4-H projects was always involving cooking, and so I remember always having to get dessert for night. I was always trying some kind of new dessert to serve at meal. I mean, we always sat down to breakfast together as a family. Dad,
you never asked what you wanted for breakfast. Your breakfast was always prepared for you, and you ate what was on the table, and it was always great.
It was
great. One of our favorites was
fried mush.
Right. and we just fixed it here.
Yeah,
this weekend.
Right, and Mom made rolls. I mean, weekends we always had dessert. Dad was a meat and potato guy. I mean, that's what he liked. That's what we had. But we always had dessert.
Fish.
It could be Jello. It could be pudding. It didn't have to. But on weekends it was either pie or cake, something special. We walked to school. I mean, we weren't that far, so we always walked to school.
And rain, snow, and what?
It didn't make
nobody ever took us.
No.
It was probably a mile, maybe a mile and a half.
I have no idea. You didn't even think about it. You just did it, by any means. So I think we were very fortunate to grow up in a small town where you could come and go.
Walkerton, Indiana.
Anywhere at any time and never be concerned for your health. I mean, your safety by any means. We went to church. Mom always saw that we
Evangelical United Brethren Church.
I can't say that.
Dad was a teacher too. He taught a Sunday school class.
Our dad did?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Yeah, he did.
Geez, then
he also during the church service, he would fall asleep and he'd be snoring and we'd have to poke him. So, but he worked hard, and not only did he work at Studebakers, but he
had a business.
He painted houses and he took out tree stumps, and he worked for the city of Walkerton after he got laid off from Studebakers. He worked for the city of Walkerton, and the electric light department would be called out all times at night for freezing or power lines down and everything. So,
he also helped build the toll road going across.
That's right. He built the toll road going across Indiana.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the Chinese own now.
Oh, do they really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They own it.
Incredible.
So, yeah, but very, very interesting. One thing about I didn't mention about when we moved in 1952 from Harrison Street to Tyler Street, we were on the back of a trailer, and we had the kitchen table, which was a Formica. I think a Formica.
Yeah, it was. Well, it wasn't Formica. It was metal. It was that.
It was
granite or that. Yeah, like
porcelain.
Porcelain.
It was a porcelain. It was a porcelain. Okay.
I think it's called granite.
And we got right in front. It was a Sunday morning. We got right in front of the Catholic church, and the doors were open, and the tray to the silverware fell off the back of the truck, and we had to stop, pick it all up, and people were looking at us outside the church. And, welcome to the neighborhood. The Mastermans, I guess that's what it was.
And we had a great place back of the property where we could go sledding. We had a hill back there we could sled.
It was called Suicide Hill. It was a great hill, pasture.
We had a creek.
We had a creek that went through it.
We could go down and wade in. And
Dad bought us a horse named Red, and they brought him on the trailer from friends of ours, and became great pastime for playing back there in the back end. But Grandpa Feckler always had a vision that he would have somebody flatten that hill out to give us more pasture land, and he had bulldozers come in there and flatten that all out and took our Suicide Hill for sledding away. But Jan and I, great times growing up. We always went mushroom hunting, and to this day we try to go mushroom hunting. But fun times.
Fun times. And we always got together with family, not on Dad's side. Almost as funny, Dad was one of 9 children, one of the youngest of the 9 children, and he was very close to his brother next to him, Elmer, who lived
Argus.
in Argus, which was probably
Argus,
maybe
Indiana.
35 miles
Yeah,
from where we lived.
that.
And there was almost every Sunday they would either be at our house or we would be at their place.
Making
and
peanut butter fudge.
fudge.
That was the biggie.
Yeah.
One funny thing about moms living in Walkerton, though, every weekend, either a Saturday or a Sunday, people would pull up out there about dinner time, and she wouldn't think a thing about it. She'd go out in the freezer and find something to eat and fix it, and everybody was welcome. And growing up as a kid, we lived probably 4 blocks from the railroad tracks, B&O railroad tracks, and bums would come over and knock on our door, and she'd take a plate out and of food and give it to them to eat. And when they'd bring the plate back, it was totally wiped off. And I remember holding it like she was afraid to touch it. She never turned them away. It was really, really funny how she fed the bums at that time. So, but neat times growing up in Indiana. All our vacations were wrapped around
Fishing,
in Minnesota, Wisconsin.
wherever, Canada, went into Canada.
Yeah, so it was
They loved to play cards.
Oh my gosh.
They taught us. Mom was a game person. I mean, my goodness gracious, she'd play a game at the drop of a hat. And they always were playing cards with relatives or friends constantly. And so we really have grown up, and that's kind of how we like to pick our friends, is to have an enjoyable evening sitting and playing games, laughing and playing, cards and stuff.
And we're still doing it today.
And we're still doing it today, by all means. So
we have aged a little bit, though. I'm 79, going to be turning 80 here on December 6th, and my younger sister.
Yeah, my younger sister is 84, right?
84, so it's as life goes on. But we are going to do something here very interesting. We've signed up for a 7-day cruise tomorrow that the Masterman and the Schultzes are going to go on there.
And we're going to go with our cousin, which was Dad's brother's daughter.
Barb and Joe
Yoakum,
from Sarasota.
That we've grown up with as kids.
We're looking forward to that, but until the next chapter of our life, we'll come back and share with you. But
we got you up to pretty much.
We brought you up to date of kind of
almost through high school, through school, right?
What happened to? Yeah, you graduated in 1957.
Richard in
58, and then I graduated in 61.
And went off to service, and in the meantime, I got married. So we will continue that saga at another time.
And then I come back for service and ended up playing in the Stingrays dance band for 10 years and worked a full-time job in the finance industry. So, along the way, we'll tell other stories later.
Right, yeah.
But thank you for
listening to this part.
Stopping in and watching.
Right.
Live from Channel 5 in Leesburg, Florida. 23 minutes.